Jake spent the following week observing David and Megan from a distance, learning their routines and patterns. He discovered that Megan visited the same upscale coffee shop every Tuesday and Thursday morning before heading to her gallery downtown. She always sat in the corner, reading art journals and sipping her cappuccino with an elegance that made her stand out from everyone else in the room. On Thursday morning, Jake positioned himself at a nearby table, pretending to work on his laptop, but watching Megan intently. She was even more stunning in person, with dark hair that cascaded over her shoulders and eyes that seemed to hold depths of intelligence and sadness. He noticed she never smiled at her phone the way Sarah did when texting David, and there was a loneliness about her that he recognized because he felt it too. When Megan stood to leave, she accidentally knocked her journal off the table, and Jake quickly moved to pick it up. Their hands touched as he handed it back to her, and for a moment their eyes met. She thanked him with a soft voice that sent an unexpected warmth through his chest. He introduced himself as Jake, a marketing consultant new to the area, and she smiled genuinely, telling him her name was Megan. They talked for 20 minutes about art, business, and the city, and Jake found himself genuinely enjoying the conversation. Megan had a sharp wit and a passion for contemporary sculpture that made her animated and beautiful. He almost forgot why he had approached her in the first place. When she mentioned she had to leave for work, Jake asked if she would like to meet again, perhaps to continue their discussion about the new exhibit at her gallery. Megan hesitated for just a moment, then agreed, giving him her business card. As she walked away, Jake felt a strange mixture of triumph and guilt. The plan was working, but something about Megan made him question whether revenge was worth the cost. That evening, Sarah came home late again, claiming another project deadline. Jake watched her move through their home with new eyes, seeing how she checked her phone constantly and how her smile seemed forced when she looked at him. He knew he should confront her, demand answers, and end this charade, but the pain of betrayal kept him silent. Over the next 3 weeks, Jake and Megan met regularly at the coffee shop, and soon their meetings expanded to lunches and gallery visits. Jake told himself he was executing his plan perfectly, gaining her trust and preparing for the moment when he would seduce her and destroy David the way David had destroyed him. But with each meeting, Jake found himself drawn to Megan in ways he had not anticipated. Megan opened up about her marriage, admitting that David had become distant and cold over the past year. She said he worked constantly, claimed he was building their future, but she felt more like a trophy wife than a partner. He attended charity events with her, smiled for cameras, but at home he barely spoke to her. She suspected he was having an affair, but had no proof, and part of her was afraid to look. Jake listened, feeling his chest tighten with anger at David and unexpected sympathy for Megan. She was a victim too, trapped in a marriage built on appearances, while her husband betrayed her with someone else. His revenge suddenly felt less like justice and more like cruelty. He found himself wanting to protect Megan rather than use her. One rainy afternoon, Megan invited Jake to a private showing at her gallery after hours. The space was intimate, filled with sculptures that cast dramatic shadows in the dim lighting. They walked through the exhibit, discussing each piece, and Jake noticed how Megan's passion made her glow with life. When they stopped in front of a sculpture about broken relationships, Megan turned to him with tears in her eyes. She confessed that she felt trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside, but was hollow within. Jake, without thinking, reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. His hand lingered, and suddenly the space between them disappeared. He kissed her, softly at first, then with growing intensity as months of loneliness and pain poured out from both of them. They pulled apart, both breathing hard, and Megan looked at him with confusion and desire mixed in her expression. Jake knew he should tell her the truth about who he was and why he had really approached her, but the words would not come. Instead, he kissed her again, and they stumbled toward her office in the back of the gallery.
2 weeks later, everything came crashing down in the most dramatic way possible. Megan had finally confronted David about his affair, and in his anger and defensiveness, David had hired a private investigator to find dirt on Megan. The investigator discovered her relationship with Jake, and when David looked into Jake's background, he realized with horror that Jake was Sarah's husband. David immediately told Sarah about Megan and Jake, and Sarah showed up at Jake's office unannounced, her face a mixture of rage and devastation. She screamed at him, demanding to know how he could betray her, how he could stoop so low as to seduce another man's wife. Jake looked at her with cold eyes and asked her the exact same question. The confrontation was brutal, with both of them hurling accusations and pain at each other. Sarah claimed her affair with David had been a mistake, born from feeling neglected and unappreciated in their marriage. Jake laughed bitterly and said she had destroyed everything they built for a man who was now destroying her reputation at work because of his own wounded pride. That evening, Jake received a call from Megan, who had just learned the truth from David. She felt used, manipulated, and heartbroken, believing that everything between her and Jake had been a lie. Jake tried to explain that it had started as revenge but had become real, that he had genuinely fallen in love with her, but Megan would not listen. She told him she never wanted to see him again and hung up. Jake sat alone in his apartment. Sarah had moved out and filed for divorce, and Megan refused to answer his calls. He had achieved his revenge, David's marriage was in ruins, and Sarah had lost her job after the scandal became public at their workplace. But the victory felt hollow, because Jake had lost Megan, the one person who had made him feel alive again. Weeks passed, and Jake tried to move forward, but he could not stop thinking about Megan. He realized that revenge had not healed his wounds, it had only created new ones. He had hurt an innocent woman who had done nothing wrong except fall for the wrong man. Finally, he wrote Megan a letter, pouring out everything, his initial motives, his genuine feelings, and his deep regret for the pain he had caused. He left the letter at her gallery, not expecting a response, but needing her to know the truth. 1 month later, Megan called him. She said she had read his letter multiple times, and while she was still hurt and angry, she understood his pain. She agreed to meet him for coffee to talk, not as lovers, but as two broken people trying to find their way forward. At the coffee shop where they had first met, Jake and Megan sat across from each other. Jake apologized sincerely, taking full responsibility for his deception. Megan listened, then shared that she had been doing her own healing, realizing that she had stayed in a loveless marriage out of fear and obligation. Both of them had made mistakes, driven by pain and the need to feel valued again. They talked for hours, and by the end, Megan said she needed more time to heal and figure out who she was outside of her failed marriage. But she did not close the door completely, suggesting that perhaps when they were both whole again, they could see if what they felt was real or just the product of their shared brokenness. Jake agreed, knowing that true love could not be built on revenge and lies. Lessons learned. This story teaches us several important lessons about human nature and relationships. First, we learn that revenge never truly heals our wounds. Instead, it creates new cycles of pain that hurt innocent people. Jake's desire to make David suffer led him to hurt Megan, someone who had done nothing to deserve his deception. His actions show us that when we seek vengeance, we often become the very thing we hate. Second, the story reveals how selfishness destroys relationships. Both Sarah and David prioritized their own desires over their marriage vows, causing devastating consequences. Their affair was not just about attraction, but about ego and the thrill of forbidden connection without considering the people they would hurt. This teaches us that true love requires sacrifice, honesty, and putting our partner's well-being alongside our own. Third, we see how loneliness and feeling undervalued can make us vulnerable to poor decisions. Megan stayed in a hollow marriage because she feared change, while Jake pursued revenge because he felt powerless. The lesson here is that we must address problems in our relationships directly through communication, rather than seeking validation elsewhere or plotting retaliation. Fourth, the story shows that real healing requires taking responsibility for our actions. Jake's growth came when he stopped blaming others and acknowledged his own role in the pain he had caused. This teaches us that while we may be victims of betrayal, how we respond to that betrayal defines our character. Finally, we learn that genuine connection cannot be built on deception. Jake and Megan's relationship started with lies and could only become real after the truth was revealed and both had done the work to heal themselves. This reminds us that authentic love requires vulnerability, honesty, and two whole people choosing each other, not two broken people using each other to fill their wounds. The story ultimately shows that the path to healing from betrayal is not through revenge, but through self-reflection, forgiveness, and the courage to rebuild our lives with integrity.
Jake Martinez stood frozen in the doorway of his home office, staring at the screen of his laptop that displayed messages he wished he could unsee. His wife Sarah had left her phone connected to the computer, and every text between her and David Chen, her boss, scrolled before his eyes like a nightmare he could not wake from. The words were intimate, passionate, and worst of all, they spoke of plans for a future that did not include him. His hands trembled as he scrolled through weeks of conversations that revealed a relationship far deeper than he had imagined. Sarah had been working late for months, claiming important projects demanded her attention, but the truth was she had been building a life with another man. The betrayal cut through him like a knife, twisting deeper with every word he read. Jake heard the front door open, and Sarah called out cheerfully, asking what he wanted for dinner. He quickly closed the laptop, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. He needed time to think, to process what he had discovered before confronting her. Walking into the kitchen, he forced a smile and told her anything was fine. That night, as Sarah slept beside him, Jake lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through their 7 years of marriage. They had built what he thought was a strong partnership, filled with love, trust, and shared dreams of starting a family. Now, all of that felt like an illusion constructed on lies. He had sacrificed so much for their relationship, turning down job opportunities that would have required relocation because Sarah wanted to stay close to her family. The next morning, Jake called in sick to work, something he rarely did, and spent hours researching David Chen. He learned that David was a senior executive at the marketing firm where Sarah worked, married to a woman named Megan Foster who came from old money and had her own successful career as an art gallery curator. David and Megan were considered a power couple in their social circles, photographed at charity events and featured in lifestyle magazines. As Jake stared at photos of Megan online, an idea began forming in his mind, dark and dangerous.
The months that followed their reunion were complicated and messy and sometimes painful, but they were also the most honest months of both their lives. Ryan worked with military intelligence to arrange for Harper to transition out of private operations and into a legitimate consulting role that utilized her skills without requiring her to engage in lethal missions anymore. Harper struggled with the transition because violence and action were all she had known for most of her adult life, and learning to exist in a world of peace and normalcy felt foreign and strange to her. But Ryan was patient and supportive, and he showed her every single day that she deserved happiness and that she was worthy of love. They moved into a small house on the coast where they could breathe fresh ocean air and watch sunsets together without looking over their shoulders constantly. Ryan retired from active duty after 20 years of service and accepted a position training the next generation of SEAL operators at the base near their home. Harper worked as a security consultant for private corporations and government agencies, which allowed her to use her analytical mind without requiring her to pull a trigger. They built a life together that honored both of their skill sets and both of their desires for redemption and peace. On their first anniversary of that night in the warehouse, Ryan took Harper to the same hotel where they had met 3 years before. He had arranged a private dinner on the rooftop, overlooking the city lights, and as they sat together, he pulled out a small box containing a diamond engagement ring that he had designed specifically with her in mind. The stone was cut in the shape of a target because that was how he felt about her. She was his focus and his center and his purpose. Harper said yes through tears of joy and threw her arms around him and kissed him with the freedom and security of someone who finally believed they deserved happiness. They married 6 months later in an intimate ceremony with only their closest friends and colleagues in attendance. Jake Williams was Ryan's best man, and he made a toast about how he had known from the moment that mysterious sniper saved their lives that there was something extraordinary about the person behind that rifle. Harper wore a white dress, and Ryan wore his dress uniform, and when they exchanged vows, they both spoke from the heart about finding love in the most unexpected places and at the most dangerous times. Harper promised to protect him, not with weapons anymore, but with her unwavering loyalty and commitment to building a future together. Ryan promised to love her completely and without reservation, accepting every part of her history and her scars and her strength. Years later, when they had children of their own, Ryan and Harper told them the story of how they met and fell in love during a time of chaos and danger. They explained that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most difficult circumstances, and that love itself is a form of courage that requires vulnerability and trust. Their children learned that their parents had both made mistakes and had both done things they were not proud of, but they had also both chosen to change and to grow and to become better versions of themselves. The lesson was clear that it is never too late to abandon destructive patterns, and that love has the power to transform even the most damaged and guarded hearts into something whole and beautiful again. Life is not about who you were or what you did in your past. It is about who you choose to become and the people you choose to love along the way.